Welcome to the Big Business on Campus podcast by JohnWallStreet and powered by Playfly Sports. We got a really interesting one today. I think a first, maybe even on our podcast here with the University of Utah. We've got the leaders with us here. We've got Mark Harlan, who is the University of Utah Athletics Director. And then we've got Matt Webb, the new CEO of Crimson Brand Partners. So today we're actually going to talk about how that got formulated and all the interesting elements behind this amazing innovation in college athletics that Mark has led and now is partnered up with Matt. So welcome, guys. Thanks for joining Corey and me on the podcast today.
Excited to appreciate being here. Thank you.
Good morning. Thanks for having
Certainly going to be, Mike, our first conversation as it relates to private equity in the school that's taking private equity on. So, Mark, why don't we start with you? And that's probably the best place to start the conversation. President Randall had said that the goal is to keep Utah athletics financially stable and foundational to the student experience. So just take a step back for a second. Help us understand where Utah athletics is financially today and when it became apparent there was this need to create a new commercial model for the school.
Yeah, I think you got to go back about 2.5, 3 years ago as we were doing the very best, as many have been trying to predict where everything was going. You know, we had been building reserves at the University of Utah for some time. We're blessed to have a sold out football stadium for up now 12 years and, record donors in terms of our Crimson Club. And so things were humming along really well, but it became apparent as rosters were going to be monetized, particularly in football and basketball in terms of payment, that what we were doing wasn't going to quite be enough. And blessed to have President Randall here coming from the business school, highly trained in creative business opportunities and very strategic. We were trying to look at different opportunities. And the one thing we really thought would be really good for us is if we could figure out how to market the whole university as one brand and really develop deep partners, in the state. And then it became, well, can we do that as an athletic department with our current structure? We had signed a really good deal with JMI. They were doing really, really good work, but you just kind of felt like there was a ceiling there in terms of not having all the assets and how we would do it. Then you got to fast forward into being a part of all the Commissioner Yormark meetings we had with multiple private equity firms. Learned a lot, right? We had a lot of all the ones people have heard of that have come through. We looked at that and we said, well, that's really not what we want to do, right? You can borrow cheaper, you can do all those kind of things. But what I really liked about the concept was, well, what if we could blend the private equity type capital to help us move forward. But what if there was someone out there who could also help us operate? Yes, we've had the Learfield and the JMI models through the years, but what if there's another way to do it? And that led us to Otro Capital and the team there. We spent 2.5 years talking to them and working it through. And how do we do it? And talking to the governor, talking to the leaderships of the state and all those kind of things. We started modeling. And once we finally realized that these guys were really what we hoped they would be, that's when we finally cut the deal. So we started in July. We created Crimson Brand Partners, a separate company outside of the university. Comes in with capital, but most importantly, it comes in with incredibly professional people. Matt Webb, who's here with us today, is the CEO. And he's building a team of 60 to 70 people. They are now handling all the revenue for the department outside of philanthropy. That still stays within the University of Utah Athletic Department. Our models show that we can not only catch up to the new spending we have to do, but we think we can also really jump ahead in our competitors. We're always competitive in everything we do, but jump ahead to be able to really grow, and thrive with our 19 teams that we have here. So really excited to get it started. It was a long journey, took a lot of creative thoughts, different roads, but we're really proud of where we are.
Just as it relates to Otro, what does that experience, that operating experience you're talking about, enable you guys to do as it relates to unlocking larger or more strategic partnerships? Put into practical terms how it helps.
Well, I will just say when I met Alec and his team, you're talking about folks that have been the highest level of professional sports, where the president of NFL franchise, senior vice presidents of baseball. Matt will talk about his background. And it just dawned on me as we went through this that these guys have done it all, seen it all in an environment that frankly was getting professional for us, right? And we just felt like they could come in and recruit a team that would be local here, that blends that experience, and then also takes a lot of my A players, into that company here that are doing such great work, and blend that all together into one. And again, the fact that they're doing this for the whole university, really moving the brand with the experience that the leadership team has. But Matt, I think this is really where you and your team have recruited some unbelievable people into the organization.
Yeah, well, and I can give you maybe a practical example of exactly what we're talking about. So if you go back, a couple of years, and this is really university wide, right? Not just, focused on the University of Utah, but almost every university is structured the same way, where you have an auxiliary services department, that is going to maintain facilities, is going to work on kind of campus-wide opportunities, right? And then within that group, they're going to have a sales arm, an activation arm, maintenance, all of those things. Then you're going to have an outsourced MMR partner, and for us, that's JMI, or that was JMI, but Playfly and Learfield and others. And then in a lot of cases, you'll have an outsourced ticketing partner, and so as we looked at this opportunity holistically, the one thing, or one of the things that professional teams do really well is they put all that under one roof, right? And so you can sit in one room with the right stakeholders to make decisions across the board, because this is, you go back to kind of the Gestalt principles of the sum is greater than the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, right? Or maybe that's the inverse. I might need to go back and fix that, but we can do that later. But the idea is that you get the right people in the room. The one decision impacts everybody else. And if you have everybody in these individual silos, it really creates consternation and the inability to grow and develop things the way that you need. So the practical example is we met with our program rights partner, Pepsi, a couple of weeks ago, and we had representatives from auxiliary services in the room. We had representatives from JMI in the room. We had our team in the room. And after the meeting, the group came up to me. They're like, "Man, that's the first time we've ever done that." And I said, "Done what?" And they said, "Well, met with our counterparts at auxiliary services with a brand." Or and had this single conversation. So when you think about operating at the highest level and being as efficient as possible, that's those are the walls that we're able to break down, and we're able to just go with a united front, which again is different than I think historically universities have been able to operate.
Can I just say here real quick? Sorry.
What does that united front enable you to do? Does that enable you to land a larger deal?
Yeah. So let's think about I don't know, let's say the Wi-Fi category, right? So if you're talking to anyone in the telecom space, they want to talk to students, they want to talk to faculty, they want to talk to the campus, right? And that would be one group over here historically. And then they want an athletics partnership, and that would be one group over here. And so it's really tough to navigate those worlds. And what it really does is create competition internally, where, one group, oftentimes wins and the other loses. Whereas now, we're able to go and present the entirety of the campus. And something to think about when we look at this opportunity. It's not just Dreisaitl Stadium on a Saturday night with 60,000 screaming Utes fans. You look at this campus, you've got 38,000 students, another 30,000 faculty and staff. You've got a hospital system with patients coming on campus every single day. It's about 80,000 people every single day. Every single day. That's a small city. So you're talking about 16 to 20 million interactions that a brand can have with people that call the university home, whether they're fans, whether they're alumni, they're coming here for a doctor's visit, or they work here. And so, that creates such an efficient marketing solution that really, the pro side can't provide. I mean, you think about 16 to 20 million people, that's Dodger Stadium, SoFi, Crypto.com Arena, that's all of those combined and more. right? And so it creates a really unique opportunity to meet the right cohorts of people too, right? That's the other thing to think about is you're talking about students 18 to 25, right? Which is, such a coveted cohort. You're talking about, fairly well-to-do faculty and staff, medical professionals. You're talking about, young families. So the opportunity to interact with the right cohorts in the right space is really unique. Sorry, Mark. I
Mark,
think
did you have a yeah,
No,
Mark.
I was just going to add that, and I'm sure Playfly would agree, right? And certainly JMI and Learfield is like, this is not a novel concept, right? Taking all the university assets. I think, and I talked to folks in that profession that have tried to do it at other places, and it seems to break down for various reasons. I think it's the largest of universities, the silos, but because of the alignment here with our trustees and our president and my department and others, combined with a really important piece, which is the discipline that will need to come from this contract, right? That took a year and a half to negotiate, right? So you combine the discipline with the alignment, I think it gives Utah an incredibly unique opportunity to march forward in the way that Matt said, right? I mean, there's no question if Playfly were to say, hey, we've been talking about this forever, but I think it took this extra step to do it. And last thing I'll say, like our friends at Clemson, like our friends at North Carolina that have created these, new ventures outside, we just felt like we needed to take an extra step to not just move or hire a few new people. We really felt like we needed a level of professional expertise that could be monetized quite candidly differently, right? And more of a professional type model. And so that's why I think gives us the very best chance to succeed.
So it's interesting, and I like the theories you built this around, and I think it doesn't matter whether you're using a vendor or not. It's more about organizing this into one professional unit, and helping drive the business and focus. Because a lot of times what we've seen, and we've helped take some universities from in-house to out-of-house, and we've seen some of the reasons why it didn't work, right? So, but what you're doing makes tons of sense, and it's interesting whether you use vendors or not. We'll leave that as a side topic because you guys still may decide, even with Crimson Partners, to use a vendor here and there for different elements. We help a lot of universities not for multimedia rights. We help them sell national sales, do some of their ticketing, some of their premium work, right? It doesn't have to be a multimedia rights agreement. So, but the interesting thing I'm not sure I'm catching yet is outside of that, building that organization and building the professionalism, and Matt bringing you in and helping oversee that. Why capital? Why add capital to it? Why not just do that part and really have that be the excellence? Where's the capital come in? Why is the capital needed? And maybe I didn't catch or hear that part.
Yeah. Well, I guess I could take that because certainly these were all the decisions that we had to make along the way. I think the president and his team, of course, being a part of that, felt like that the upfront capital in the new company and basically creating assets out of our revenue sport would be something that would allow us to invest rather than pulling back, which I think quite candidly a lot are having to do as they reconcile the new budget realities. We don't know if we're going to get support in DC, right? We could be in an unregulated environment for years. And so we felt like there was protection there, but also to continue to invest, whether that was CapEx or whatever else that we needed to do. If we wanted to borrow off the asset going forward, I mean, that's really what we've done here in this new company. That's why we decided to go with capital. And then we just negotiated, what we wanted to do in terms of the actual deal itself, with a key importance that our trustees were very serious about was making sure we had governance rights and majority interest and all that. But that's why we did that. We just don't want to, you're an entrepreneur. We don't want to be leaning back right now and not investing in our facilities. We just announced we're going to do a big renovation here of Huntsman Center. We want to keep leaning in.
And how do you is the fundraising for that the same as traditional, or are you able to tap into some of these funds for that? Like, how is that?
We can certainly do that. We can certainly do that if we need to. The Huntsman Center project isn't directly contracted with Crimson Brand Partners and Otro. So we'll do some good old-fashioned fundraising, which, by the way, still stays in the department. We have lofty goals. That's a communication message. One of the things we thought of, would this affect our fundraising? But people think, oh, you've got private equity. Do you not need to do that anymore? But we do, and we have a big program to try to get all our scholarships costs. We've added 30 scholarships this last year. We plan to add more to the department, so we want the donors to continue to support us in that.
So Otro has an economic interest in Crimson Brand Partners. I know you guys haven't released a ton of details around how the deal is structured, but how should people understand their return profile? And is there a path for you guys to buy back their stake or otherwise unwind this partnership if it doesn't go the way you anticipate?
Yeah, I love the fact that we both have a vested interest to make this work, right? I mean, I've had long talks with not only Matt, but with others. I mean, them being the first, we get all the publicity about being the first, but they're kind of the first too, right? This is a very important, successful thing that I'm sure Otro and certainly Utah Brand Partners, you don't want to be the first out and not make it work. So there's some built in, and there's of course financial incentives in there. In terms of the buyout, we did spend a lot of time on that. We're going to have a lot of optionality when this is over. Maybe we take it back, right? Maybe they move on. We keep this great staff, and we just figure out a different way to do it. But we left it wide open. We also want to make sure whoever comes in next is someone that is the kind of partner that we currently have now. And we certainly put in some safety for that.
And the only thing I'd add to that is, this is structured as a build, right? I think a lot of the fear on the outset, if you're kind of looking at it from the outside, is that it's private equity. They're going to come in, strip everything down, bare bones it, and kind of sell it for parts, if you will. The way the partnership, the JV is structured is that we're here to build. As Mark mentioned, we've got some pretty intense capex plans. We're building a staff. We're bringing in, Mike, to your point, outside vendors who are experts in their areas, right, to make sure that we are maximizing the fan experience and shortening your line at the concession stand, but making sure when you get to the front of the line, it's a better hot dog. It's not a cheaper hot dog. It's a better one, right? And so that's a bit of a misnomer that I think the way that we're structured allows us to really lean in, and that's one of the reasons I'm here is because this is a build. This is the most unique. It's a 176-year-old brand, and we're launching a new company out of it. I mean, where can you do that in the world? Which is pretty cool.
So on that point, sorry, I was just going to follow on to that point real quick, Matt. You talked about some private equity sometimes has a bad rap for sort of a cost or what have you, but this is about the build. What can you talk to us? I mean, obviously, if you think about the industry, some concerns were that they would have like approvals and controls over things, not necessarily sort of that negative storyline of cost, but more just controls that traditionally you wouldn't want to give up as a partner in some ways. How does that work? Because I think our audience would really be interested as they're thinking about these questions and they're thinking about these decisions. How did you guys set that up to be a comfortable model for you that allowed you to be comfortable with moving forward with a scenario like this?
Matt, I'll start with that, and maybe you're feeling how it all landed, and you've been here for a week. We'll see if it's working so far. We spent a lot of time on this, right? And to your point, I mean, there's probably a week that doesn't go by that someone won't ask, if X coach isn't doing this, are you going to get a call from Crimson Brand Partners, right? So in its simplest form, the university does have governance rights on the board. That's a technical thing. I'm the chairman of the board, and I can't imagine we'll get much conflict there, but it is in the favor of the university. And that was something that we said from the very beginning that would be a non-negotiable, and we've worked all that out. From a standpoint of rosters, football, basketball, these guys are part of their deals. They are providing all the revenue share number for us, kind of like a bank comes to me, and then I make my decisions just like any other athletic director and his or her senior team decide where all that goes. Now, I will also say that these guys, Matt included, who just spent a long time at the Saints, and they got a lot of expertise, and so the call will probably wind up going the other way sometime. when we're in something that I could use some advice, particularly in a lot of different areas, because they grew up in the business. They grew up in the business of sport, and they've been around a lot of stuff. But from a structural place, my peers have asked a lot, and we're very comfortable with where that sits as it relates to the University of Utah.
Yeah, I think the easiest way to look at it, guys, is compare it to the pro model, right? So, if let's use the Saints. I'm not making any decisions on who Mickey Loomis is drafting or who we're getting in free agency, and I I want nothing to do with that room. And it's the same thing here, right? For us, the beauty of this, as you compare it to the Saints, is we could have record years in revenue, at the pro level, and do naming rights deals, and if they ever let us, do jersey patches, you do those deals, and you cornerstone partnerships, all of that, right? But that actually doesn't impact the on-field performance, right? You're not going to be able to go out and spend more money because you had record revenues on the commercial side at the pro level. That is flipped on its head here, right? If we do well, as Mark said, we're the bank. The bank has more money in it, and we can, that they can decide how to use that, which is the beauty of this relationship is we are all incentivized to grow revenues as much as possible, to build NIL, to educate our partners on the value of using our student athletes, and across the board, right? We're not just talking about football. We have an amazing gymnastics program, amazing volleyball program. I mean, our ski team is incredibly elite, and those things are incredibly important to the university, to the ecosystem, and to our fans, right? And so the more we can fill the coffers, the more we can allow, Mark and his team to go do the great things that they do. It's certainly the rising tide, analogy. And again, that just doesn't exist at the pro level in the same way, which I think is why you see, folks like me and some of the great people that we've been able to hire, and even in other teams, Clemson with Drake and others, make that jump. It's like, okay, I can make an impact at the professional level, which is really fun and really great. But the impact I can make at the collegiate level is even more meaningful, and it actually impacts on-field and on-court performance, which is just uniquely different.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in with the revenue question there, Matt. Utah's state auditor warned before the finalization of this deal that the capital was going to be depleted unless you guys paired it with substantial growth in operating income or meaningful cost containment measures. The question I have for you is, where's the most obvious untapped revenue coming from?
The most obvious, I think, is corporate partnerships. And it's because when you look at, again, the previous model, it was just handicapped, right? You had these shackles that didn't allow for a brand to be able to, take advantage of the entire university ecosystem. So now that we're able to do that, right? Now that we're able to demonstrate the value of the entire university, that 80,000 people per day, every day, plus our millions of fans across the valley and across the region, it's a whole new ballgame. And the conversations we're having, it's funny. Partners are incredibly grateful and eager to figure out what that means. But yeah, I'll give you a really kind of simple example, right? So America First Credit Union has been, the official credit union on the athletic side for a few years, and for them, they've been eager to expand beyond the realm of athletics, and that has just not been possible. And so we're talking about now in that category and others is, okay, what does it mean to be able to talk to students at orientation, to go present at the business school, right, to go be a part of the entrepreneurship program, and to connect in meaningful ways with the medical community, right? That those things are just non-existent before. So I would say that's probably the biggest opportunity.
So it's interesting because what you're saying is almost the nature between the university and the athletic department, and combining the opportunities is one of the biggest sort of growth levers. which is really interesting because if you look at it across the ecosystem, you can do that also without creating that entity, right? You can just have better coordination. You can have lower politics. You can have more connectivity. You can have centralized teams, right? Like, I'll just give one example. Like, we're doing that coordination ourselves as Playfly Sports between Penn State Athletics and Penn State University, right? And we're helping them actually see that value, right? So it's interesting. So for our listeners, just, that innovation, you don't have to go all the way to brand partners model, right, to get that innovation. So, but you're showing that it works. So you're proving that having that combination works. So I think it's something that's helpful for our audience to see, is that the more coordination, the more you can break down those political elements, the more dollars you're going to get and you're going to grow. Whether you've set up a separate entity or not, you're proving that that's.
Yeah, that's what I mentioned earlier. I thought that was really important. This is not innovative in terms of that concept, but the type of discipline it takes. I mean, this deal wasn't just done with athletics. It was done by leaders across the campus, right? I mean, when I've done MMR deals in the past, it's kind of me, whether I was at UCLA, whether I was at South Florida, whether I was here, this is a whole different approach on the front side all the way through. But your point is spot on. I just think we have the discipline now, the trustees, everybody understanding the importance of that, and everybody can benefit if we work together. But that is kind of, I would also say these guys are taking over stadium management, and we're seeing a lot of with Rice Eccles, when we did all the premium a few years ago, a lot more acts, and so they're running all that. There'll be a lot of creativity there. So there's a lot of different things that I think will move the needle. And to your point earlier, Mr. Wall Street, you're exactly right, and she was right. I mean, obviously, if we did a deal that we'd have to deplete capital in 11 months, I don't know if I'd be sitting in this chair, right? We have to, our models had to hit where we thought it would hit. And we've been really clear with her, and we appreciate she's doing her job. This is a flagship state institution, and we've been in great contact with her and her team as we go through this. But our modeling shows that there's a ton of upside.
And Mike, I think to add to your point, I think in general you need some sort of agent of change, right? Whether that's Playfly, whether that's creating something new, something has to rub raw to get these people together and kind of galvanize the units. I think for us, the biggest thing was, we have an incredible board of trustees that they get it. They believe in Mark and President Randall and their vision. And so there's a level of trust, I think, that that maybe can be learned, as you talk about, the other universities and institutions out there that are trying to figure this out. I mean, it's trust first, creating that agent of change, and then finding the right partner, whether it's internal or, whether you have a third party that's bridging the gap. I don't really think it matters. It's just like getting the irritant there to say, okay, we have to scratch this itch and get it figured out.
Yeah. I like that, because we see that too, not just in MMR, but even in our ticketing and premium. When you come in and have new strategic thought, bring in your new best practices that you see, right? We can create 200-300% growth factors by just creating that friction, to your point. So we see that on the Playfly Sports side. So that brings in a question: what is the target growth? Like, what are you looking for, next year and then in 5 years, right? We don't need real numbers, but just percentages generally, like the lifts.
Yeah, he's more on the financial side, and obviously their goals. Of course, we all have that. But I tell you, one of the things that I'm really looking forward to is, and I thought Doug, my counterpart at Baylor, had a great article in USA Today this week. If your listeners haven't, go look at it. Just a reminder of everything we're dealing with. We may have been losing sight of the fans, right, and the experience. And Matt and I probably spend more time talking about that than we do the dollars, which of course all have to come into. But really trying to figure out a way that when you come to these events, I don't know if we're going to win 11 football games every year. I mean, we certainly show that we can over and over and over again. But we got to make sure that the experience is really good. And we're going to be doing a lot of surveys on that. But Matt, I'll let you speak to kind of, walking and running and sprinting in this process.
Yeah, no, that's where I was going to start. If we're still interesting enough for you guys to talk to us in a year, hopefully we'll win a bunch of games, right, across all these different sports. But the thing that I think we'll want to hang our hat on in year one is ingress. Is that quicker? Egress, is that better? Are the concession lines, are our choke points loosened up, right? Are people going to a game at Rice Eccles Stadium and saying, wow, that was different, right? And even if it's that, right, that's a huge win out of the gates. And we're bringing some of the best in the business, the Shine Entertainment Group. If you've heard of them, they're incredible. They worked on the Golden Knights project and the Kraken and a bunch of others. But we're bringing them in again, Mike. To your point, you bring in third parties when you need them, right? And we're going to revamp the in-bowl experience and give the fans what they want. I think another thing a year from now is hopefully our fans will have a little more choice. Rice Eccles Stadium, it's an older venue, and we're working on a lot of plans that you're not going to see out of the gates, but over a couple of years, hopefully a fan will say, if I want a bleacher seat and I just want to be out there and enjoy the game, great, we have that. But if you want other choice and you want other opportunity and you want premium, hopefully we'll be able to provide that too. And the Huntsman Center is, to Mark's point, we're looking at renovating that, but until that happens, we want that building full. That building used to be full night in and night out, whether it was gymnastics or basketball or volleyball or whatever was going on in there. And we need to get back to that. And we've got an incredible coach and Alex Jensen, great GM. And we're excited about what they're doing, on the court, and we got to meet the moment, and be smart about how we're filling that building. And the other thing I'd say, we're building a content strategy and a content team, to tell the right stories to our audience. I think we kind of get stuck, at least as I look at our channels, as okay, there's a football voice, there's a basketball voice, there's gymnastics, whatever. We need, yes, we're going to have individual voices, we're going to have individual personalities, but we need one kind of centralized theme, right? That needle that'll be thread throughout all of our content, and we need to tell the great stories of these student athletes, and give the fans what they want. So hopefully when you come back in a year, you're going to say, I didn't know this about X, Y, and Z, and that's really cool. And then I'd say, we'll be donning some new unis next year, which would be pretty cool too. So hopefully all that will come to pass.
That's awesome. Getting back to fans is always the most important. Sticking with the fans. Yeah. That's the bread and butter. That's how it all works out. Just one thing you mentioned there was content, which is interesting. And you talked about student athletes. There's an interesting balance that's happening in athletic departments going forward between revenue for the school and figuring out how to drive traditional NIL above the cap. And a lot of the universities have started to use content like Playfly. We have a sport and story product that goes out there that creates these interesting subscription models that you can drive value for the student athletes themselves. Or some universities like using those products to drive revenue for the university. So where you start thinking about that and you have this new enterprise, how do you think about whether you're driving dollars for the athletes now above the cap, or whether you're driving dollars for the brand partners business? And does that ever conflict, or do you see that conflicting in the future?
Well, it's interesting. I feel like historically, or I guess I say historically, it's been for the past couple of years, it's almost been like, okay, thank you for the partnership, but we also need you to give to NIL, right? And it doesn't feel synergistic in the sense that the brand is getting anything back for that. And so as we're building out this content strategy, and again, to Mark's earlier point, we're still hiring the team. We haven't even hired our head of content yet. So if send them our way.
I know somebody who's pretty good at content.
This guy up here. But for us, we need to make sure that we're developing content in a way that does both, right? That drives the value for the brand and drives NIL, right? And that's not that hard to do if you take a a concentrated approach to it, right? I mean, they do it all the time. When you look at NBA and NFL, we have to spend a little time with it.
And Mark, how do you think about that? Because we have a service called Playfly Max that helps athletic departments drive above the cap revenue, right? We have a whole team that we put in place that drives that, right? But it's not going into the athletic department buckets. It's going to a different category. It's going directly to the athletes because it's approved above the cap dollars. So how do you think about that? Because that's really your decision as to which
Right.
line these things fall.
Well, there's been journeys with that over the last 2 or 3 years, of looking at our revenues that came to support the enterprises versus, these revenue sports that need to be fed and retaining and recruiting the very, very best. We're now hitting on something I'm probably most excited about in this deal. And I think Matt's a little understated. I mean, he is going to be, and we talk about this all the time. Everybody's going to benefit from our top athletes, staying at the University of Utah and being recruited in. But the innovation that these guys are going to bring to the table to lift what I believe has been a much more organized system we've had. I give JMI credit for that and my team credit for that, for really integrating better. But it's still a little clunky, like it is everywhere, right? We're all trying to figure this out. But, there is some expectations, formally to make sure they're involved with NIL, and that's just on paper. But the reality of it is Matt's already seeing the power of a Devin Dampierre or, we have these Olympic gymnasts from all over the world. We've got some pretty superstar folks, and, being a Ute in this area is a big deal. So, I've heard from our sponsors that have utilized them. They love them, but now we get to integrate all of this in where we want to see more of our folks co-branded with these brands in town. We see that with the Jazz a lot, and now with when the hockey team showed up here overnight, right? We see that a lot too, and it's just something we're both vested in. But you can imagine we spent a lot of time talking about this so that we didn't have to waste time on who gets what, right? We've got the averages of what we're doing above cap, what our athletes are doing. It's growing 100% a year. You know that. It's crazy. What basketball has available was not what they had last year, right? It's just, so we all have to figure this out. And that part's fun now because we've got, like Matt said, these guys have been dealing with high-end NFL athletes or NBA athletes, how you manage that in a clunky system, right? Clippers are finding out you better handle that the right way, right? So that's what we're all doing together. And it's been fun. Our athletes have been asking a lot of questions about it. Matt's had fun meeting with our football staff and our basketball staff, going through it all. And I wish I could say that it's a simple roadmap, but we got the best chance, I think, to be creative in it going forward.
Matt, I recently wrote a story about this. There was a quote. I don't know who said it, but you guys have been giving away a lot of tickets. So as you move towards a more professionalized commercial model, how do you think about price discipline and ticketing inventory that may have historically been discounted or comped or even just treated as relationship currency?
Yeah, it's such an interesting question. Listen, that unfortunately that happens everywhere. You look at any professional team, you've got tickets going to anyone and everyone. I think for us, we really need to spend a lot of time looking at demand. We have, to Mark's point, 12, 13, 14 years of sellout. And so, maintaining, price integrity is top of the list for us. And then developing choice, like I talked about earlier, right? For us, you come to a game right now and, you have a couple of different options in terms of, if you want season tickets, well, one, they're not available, but, from a singles perspective, you've got a couple different options out there. And for us, you look at the professional, ranks, you've got 11, 12 different seating options, not just areas of the building, but how you participate in the game, right? Whether it's an all-inclusive club or, it's a standing room only seat, or, you're just Joe Six-Pack up in the rafters. So we want to meet people where they are. We want to give them choice. And we can't subsidize fandom either. So we've got to be smart about that. And there are areas, where we're going to be, more restrictive and more thoughtful. And there are areas where, we really want to make sure that a family of four, a family of five can have a fantastic experience and not feel like they just spent their monthly budget.
It's beautiful now. People call me for tickets. I just send them to Matt. It's like
Uh,
it was fun, like going through these guys in the beginning. Our friends in the pros. We're like, okay, we got these things called recruiting tickets. You know what I mean? We have this thing called a 10,000 student section, which, by the way, President Board made that very clear. You're not touching those. But that's all the things that we've had fun working out the differences between. But yeah, we football, the comps wasn't the situation, but some of our arena sports, we've been doing some of that. You always want to satisfy a coach who wants a big crowd, but as we've learned, the data is pretty clear. If you give away a ticket, 40% maybe they'll show up, right, as opposed to the other. But just being really smart about those prices, and frankly being really transparent. I've made a real public commitment of that, of being really transparent, on what that is, because that is certainly something that people automatically assume that Matt's going to crank everything up, and that's just not the way it works.
So when you guys think about, some of your inventory, whether it's ticketing, whether it's sponsorship, and you start seeing interesting innovations at the conference level, like we just saw just recently as we're recording this, a really interesting deal that the Big 12 did.
I don't know what you're talking about, Mike.
Yeah. And you now have this amazing commercial partnership that says, hey, we're monetizing this stuff now, and we actually have even financing based on this monetization with Otro. So even more important that we sort of are monetizing it ourselves. And you start to look at some of those deals that are coming through, and from my perspective, and I think it's a little bit in the market, sometimes they're a little under monetized what you can do locally versus what you can do, and you may not get as big of a bang as if you find that dollar amount locally. Like we've been doing a lot of patch deals, et cetera, locally, and seeing much bigger numbers that maybe get split up. How do you think about that? How do you think about whether the inventory is used at a conference level, and how do you think about the value of a deal when it comes in and evaluating whether you take the money or not? You can use that Big 12.
Let me start with that one real quick. And this was something that we talked about because we were in some negotiation period when the PayPal deal that Commissioner Yormark brought forward, which I thought was a real good live example as we were fleshing out details, right, Matt and the team. Those are going to pop up, and we have an obligation to be a really good campus partner. But in terms of being a part of the Big 12. But absolutely, everybody votes, right? Eventually the board votes on those decisions, and Utah may vote yes, they may vote no, but we'll have to go forward with what the conference does. But, I know there's some drama around the Monster thing. We're a Pepsi school, there's all those different kind of things, but that's part of the navigational piece. But Matt, you guys knew that was going to be something, and hopefully at the end of the day, it's all additive.
Yeah, I mean, listen, the way all the leagues do this, right? This isn't new. The NFL will come in and drop a new deal on you. The NBA does the same thing. It's not new. I think the way, Mike, I think you answered your own question in a really thoughtful way, which is at the local level, we're able to integrate a brand, not just on the jersey, but into the entire story of what we do, right? They're interwoven into the fabric of who we are as a university and how we go to market, right? And so for us, that story that we're presenting to potential partners is vastly different than what the Big 12 has done. And again, kudos to them. They went in the market, they got the deal that they thought was best, and we're going to be supportive of that. But we look at it completely differently. It's the patch is just a part of that story, right? This is an entire program, and it's about how you engage with the community. It's about the stories you tell, the players that are impacted by it. That's really what we're presenting to potential partners. And I don't think the conference has that ability at the local level. Right, they can kind of cast that wide net, but not dive in deep. Sorry, Corey.
So it's additive, you support it, but not if it's going to use the inventory, right? If you only had one spot to use, you think, and I agree with you, creating that local experience. That's what we do in MMR, whether that's internal or outsourced, right? It creates that bigger experience for the partner.
That's right.
right? So if it's additive, it's worth accepting. If it's in lieu of, it might not be worth accepting, depending on.
I think that's exactly right. I think that's exactly right. I mean, listen, for us, we're really grateful. The thing that gets lost in this is that the NCAA and Big 12, they're also giving us the opportunity to put our own patches on, to brand it ourselves, right? And helmet bumpers and equipment branding and all these other things. And so they've unlocked a lot for us. They really have, and it's been fun working on valuing those things and presenting it to partners in thoughtful ways. So yes, I totally agree with you, Mike.
Just as a shameless plug for the Sports Advisors podcast we recently did an episode on premium sponsorship inventory in the Monster Big 12 deal. And one overlooked aspect of it is now you're going to have Big 12 branding on Monster cans in every convenience store in the country, every supermarket in the country. And oh, by the way, who drinks Monster? 18 to 34-year-old young men. And that's exactly who you're trying to reach. So a lot of value in that partnership above and beyond the dollars that'll come back to the individual schools.
And flexibility, NIL, cash, everyone might have their opinion on the money, but I appreciate you saying that. I mean, I thought, I saw Brett on Tuesday and he was maybe taking some hits, but he worked really hard on this. And I think there's some additive there. And I met with all those guys. I ran into all the Monster executives, just great dudes. They're really, really fired up about it, but I don't know if the gentleman on the screen and maybe the leadership at Learfield and JMI are scratching their heads a little bit, but that takes good communication and working with partners to try to figure things out. Brett's different now. He's gonna come with stuff that's unique, and in our experience so far in the conference, it's been a net positive.
He's done a tremendous job for the conference. Tremendous. Last question, because I know we're running up against time. You guys recently made a move. You were with Under Armour forever, or seemingly forever. You've made a move. You're going to be with Adidas starting in 2027. How does that deal fit into the broader CBP strategy?
Well, I'll just say briefly, Under Armour's been an incredible, awesome adventure for University of Utah, 18 years. And I was with Kevin, too, when I was at South Florida's athletic director. I've been with him for a long time. So, we had a long talk about all the changes that were going on here and the opportunity to go out on the market with something I felt Utah needed to do. And to his credit, the contract was pretty restrictive on the timing of that. He said, Mark, do what you do and let's see where it all ends. And where it ended is we just felt Adidas had a great opportunity for us to, with all the changes, new football, new basketball coach, Matt and his team, et cetera. And we were really, really impressed with all those guys and the opportunities, some of the things they're doing in NIL. Really excited about that. Called Kevin and his team, and obviously it was a tough call, but a lot of respect, and we all agreed we're gonna have a great final year. We're gonna have a lot of fun with them and try to win some more championships. We've won a lot with them, but I'll let Matt take how Adidas coming in next year, it'll be next July, can really fit into what we're trying to do.
Yeah, I'm incredibly excited about this, guys. I mean, John and Murph and the guys at Adidas, when we went through the the presentations and just the discussion with them, they're leaning in to college in such a meaningful way. I mean, look, they have both teams in the championship last year, and they're adding more. They really believe in the student athlete experience. They really believe in what we're able to do with and for their brand. They want to be true partners with us, from the jump, right? And so that means coming up with really interesting, alternate shirts and marketing plans and how we work with the student athletes to promote, drops and new things, that they're building and working on. So they are going to be fantastic partners. They are. Look what they're doing in the World Cup. It's incredible, right? And so for us, we couldn't be more excited. Under Armour's been great, and they'll continue to be great. But we're really looking forward to the future with Adidas.
Well, that's awesome. So I think we're right up against time here. So I'm gonna say thank you again for being on the Big Business on Campus podcast by JohnWallStreet, powered by Playfly Sports. So I think this was an industry first for us to be able to talk to leaders and innovators like you guys, changing the world of how you think about college athletics and all the revenue growth and the rights that an athletic department has, and combining that with, as you said, with the university rights and properties as well. So such cool conversation, and bringing in third-party capital. Wow, so many interesting things that you guys are breaking ground on. So we love talking to everybody who breaks new ground, and you guys are certainly leading in that. So thanks for joining Corey and me today on this podcast, and hopefully we'll get a lot of learning around the ecosystem from all of our audience on all the amazing things you guys talked about today. So thanks again. Appreciate it.
Thank you guys. Keep up the great work. It's really helpful, and we learn a lot listening from you guys. So appreciate you.